always never get it right.
And we're live. And that's brilliant. Yeah, we lost connection a few moments ago, but again, it's only 57 minutes past 4. And if we didn't have tech issues, to be something badly wrong, because every week it's something. So we wait a couple of moments and hopefully we get people on. Yeah. Is it Ivor Winters, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
How are you?
Hello. Right, okay, great. So that's working now, yeah. That's
good. Brilliant. And yeah, we'll wait a couple more minutes and see what happens. And does that say this me?
Avril, yeah. I worked with
Leo.
I worked with years back, yeah. Right. I worked with Avril several years ago.
What was that like?
Ashbourne, County Meath.
Hard to work with?
No.
Nobody's listening. Go on.
Yeah. No, it was very, very good. Yeah. A lot of potato fields, big archaeology digs.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
These were the days.
Mental, to be honest with you. Mental.
What did you find, or what were we looking for?
Mills, ditches, more mitches.
We actually lived in San House too, is it?
Yes. The priest's house, isn't it? In Ashbourne, County Meath.
Hazy days. When was it?
Huh?
When did you work together?
Yeah. Jesus, I don't know. It was 2000. Must have been 2006 or something.
It was a while back, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be like the last days of the Celtic Tiger, you know what I mean? The last couple of years of the Celtic Tiger and the big where I was working.
I'm feeling 2004 maybe?
No, maybe, I don't know. I was working on a huge site there called Raystown in Meath, where they found loads of mills, all from the
Ever said 2004, that's why I guessed it.
Oh yeah. 2004 then, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Big mill sites, the Raystown, County Meath. There was the ancient mills, about 1,000, I don't know, 1,000 odd years old.
Wow.
Yeah. Early Christian, as they call them, or something. I think they were anyway. Nice site.
Actually, I don't know if she comes back with. We know what happened anyway, that's for certain. You did work together.
Yeah.
Okay,
you
can be sure of that much. Yeah. Okay, it's 5 o'clock and we're going to kickstart this, and it's an interesting one, I think. And eventually, if we do end up in some asylum, we'll definitely still try to keep our Sunday shows going no matter where we are. But with that, this is on Star Wars. Now, last week we were talking about the Matrix and that mentality thing. This is about the movies, it's about sci-fi, it's about imagination. And imagination comes from ideas, and ideas came from people, and people have culture and tradition and ways of life. I sense, maybe it's the Force, that Star Wars has very strong links with Ireland. It's connected. I think there's a couple more connections that haven't been mentioned, but that'd be kind of a conspiracy theory type going on there with me. Who knows? More important and fundamental to this, not just this show, but all our shows and everything I pretty much do, is geared in a particular direction. I mean, I have a sense of direction, no matter how all over the shop it might look sometimes, talking about various different things, sci-fi's, aliens, and Irish travelers. But it comes down to mental health. It comes down to tradition, culture, way of life that has been taken from us. And what is left is nothing but some of the worst health statistics on the planet when it comes to communities. So that has been taken. Reclaiming it is what we aim to do. But not to take ownership over it, but to have ownership over our history. In other words, we don't ram it down somebody else's throat and say this is how it is and this is the way it will be. It's not like that. And like I said, the most fundamental part of this is around traveler mental health. And underlying this show comes off the back, unfortunately and sadly, of a tragedy that happened yesterday evening. My daughter-in-law's brother committed suicide. 13 months after his other brother had committed suicide. So these are just some of the tragedies that are ongoing. These were family men left families behind them. A great deal of tragedy. It's quite common right across Ireland for travellers. Everyone knows family members. Everyone knows someone that knows someone that had committed suicide. As we mentioned before, there's one family that had 7 members of their family commit suicide. For me, that is a mountain of psychological pressure, stresses, and all that goes with that. So when I talk about travellers settled, it's not about creating divides. It's about breaking down barriers. But we can only use those labels to do so. So hopefully we'll get there eventually. And yeah, this is about promoting Travel Vision also. It's a place for travellers, so we can create our own, rebuild our own old world that can coexist in 2019 and beyond in Ireland. So if you're a Star Wars fan, I hope we don't blotch this, because I think it's the final episode of that series coming up soon.
Yeah.
So George Lucas, is that the guy?
Yes.
He seems to be a bit creative, doesn't he?
He is a bit creative.
Yeah, I get that vibe from him.
Yeah.
George, if you're watching this, I hope we do it good. I hope we do it justice. A couple of things in there that either you know or didn't know. We're going to put them to you. And if you want to get back to us, you're more than welcome. And you might be quite pleased. Now, Dylan Foley is a Star Wars fanatic. And his mother had contacted me during the week, and this is an intervention. It's not. He's a great passion for it, but he also has a great deal of skills in various other parts. He does the whole archaeology. He's got 20 years of experience in this. He focuses on different kinds of philosophies. So it's been a great addition with travellers. Just briefly on that, because I know I got into a rant sometimes, I won't stop talking. We had come across a very unique discovery this evening. We've been searching for quite a long time to make the links, and I wouldn't have to search that hard, to be quite honest with you. But this particular find that we will launch very soon is quite amazing. It's probably one of his finest archaeological finds, if you ask me. But anyway, that'll be a surprise, and it confirms beyond a shadow of a doubt who Irish travellers were. And we have proof, physical proof, going back hundreds, if not thousands of years. So that's quite remarkable. Not just this particular find we found, but the culture and traditions on that are there for thousands of years. Dylan Foley, sorry for taking up so much time. Star Wars.
Oh, no, it's perfect. That's, yeah.
If I get this right, this is about aliens. It's about a big...
People might have seen the cup, I was going to say to you.
What cup?
My cup that was on this video a few times.
I didn't see that cup.
My Stormtrooper cup.
Oh, yeah. Oh, mugs,
I
yeah.
don't have it this time. For some
Where is it?
In the kitchen.
In the kitchen. And also you have this up here. Talk us through. This is true office history when you were in college, was it?
No, I don't think so.
Gillette, you bastards. This is what.
Just after that, yeah.
This is the character who played this guy, the guy he passed recently.
That's
didn't
right.
he?
Yeah. I can't remember his name now, to be honest, but yeah, you're right. The actor died just recently. Yeah.
This will give my people.
The Wookiee. As I was, we were speaking about archaeology. I was sometimes out in the field. My excuse would be we didn't have much time for shaving and the haircuts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I might have been referred to as the Wookiee. All right. Yeah. Or at least that's what I overheard. Anyway, that's grand. We won't go into it.
I hope to God I haven't traumatized the poor fella.
Yeah.
Star Wars, Irish
Okay.
Traveller, Star Wars history, Star Wars Ireland. What are we talking about?
Okay.
Tell us about Star Wars first,
Star Wars.
about some of the characters. What's the theme of it? Sorry, what did yeah?
Well, next week is a big thing. Next week is the what is it? The Rise of Skywalker, I believe, is on the 19th is the release of the last part of the epic.
How many were made?
There's 8 of them so far. Yeah, in that line, that story arc. I mean, there's more stuff. I mean, there's endless comics. There's this, there's that. You know yourself.
Yeah. I
think the first one released in '77, and of course, all of us know about it. I mean, the reason we're talking about it is because it's like modern mythology, isn't it?
What's mythology?
So the stories that
for our viewers, not for me, I know.
Yeah, of course. Epic stories that are the kind of archetypal stories that are shared amongst all cultures on the planet, if you know what I mean.
Or like gods and demons and dragons and fairies and...
Exactly that.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
Yes. And so Star Wars is not technically sci-fi in a way. It's actually a mythology. It's classical mythology it takes place in space. It just happens to take place in space. It could just as easily be in Stone Age.
The story was applied to a sci-fi movie, what you're saying, is it? They were taking abstracts probably from ancient cultures, ancient mythologies, and basically he was just a guy with good ideas and used his imagination.
Yeah, that's true. So Lucas, as you said, was conscious of that. He used Japanese, very influenced in his filmmaking by Japan, Kurosawa, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Japanese stories. He had a Japanese story involving a princess who ends up locked in a tower and what have you. You know what I mean? And obviously, he takes some artistic influence from the Japanese culture.
And the Japanese culture being very similar type to the Irish clan system, wasn't it?
Well, we talked about some similarities. Yeah, we talked about some similarities before, but it's not. No, in this case, it's not direct.
I'm not trying to say that Mr. Lucas took that. No. The Japanese culture is rich, beautiful, and all that. But there are similarities. We talked about Japanese culture before for a reason.
Okay, well, to lock it down, instead of me waffling too much, let me say that it's the mythology. George Lucas was a big fan of a fellow, Campbell, Joseph Campbell. Yeah. Who used to talk about the monomyth or whatever. So when we go way back, and this is where archaeology comes into it.
Monomyth is, again, the ancient...
He would have said that there was a single kind of narrative structure underlying nearly all human stories, and that this goes back into the ancient past so far that a bit like if you follow a river back, no matter what stream you follow, you'll end up in the one place.
I got you.
If you know what I mean. So all human cultures kind of lead back to this source at some point. And the stories always have... he called it the hero's journey, and a lot of script writers in Hollywood would be very familiar with this. But Campbell was very influential, working in the early part of the 19th century, or 20th century, sorry. Be very influential with his hero's journey about saying that all the stories would have a similar kind of a theme involved.
Smart guy.
A person who starts off in the ordinary world and ends up going off to meets the gods kind of thing, and then returns from fights a battle against himself and the gods and whatever, and then returns to the...
That's in the Bible too, isn't it?
It would be probably.
Well, they make references, Moses talking to God, come down from the mountain and all this kind of stuff. Was it Moses?
Yes.
Or someone like that,
yeah, and many of them, Enoch, for example, would have, now that you mention it, would have, in the Old Testament, was supposed to have got writing, was handed the writing by the gods. He ascended a stairway to heaven, I think. And
was I heard the song,
yeah. And returned with writing and various other things from the gods, yeah. So
Mr. Campbell would be an ideal person to have if you're into making movies.
Lucas was a big fan of this guy, yeah. I mean, he said it himself. George Lucas would have.
One of his inspirations, believe it or not, or he was inspired by that guy Campbell, was a guy called James Joyce.
That's right.
Do you see why I keep dragging it back to Ireland?
Yes. You're dead right.
So that was his. And James Joyce was into that ancient Celtic storytelling too, was he, or did he have an understanding of it?
He did have an understanding of it, yeah. As far as I'm aware, I'm not a huge expert on Joyce, but as far as I'm aware, in Finnegan's Wake and things like this, he mentions many of the Irish mythology, including, and you're right, yeah, Campbell was a noted scholar on Joyce, yeah. He mentions Irish mythology, and this is where we're starting to get not just to Ireland, but into words where we are in Sligo.
Yeah, special place.
Yeah, he mentions the Fomorians, the Fovora. I think it's some of the chapters in Finnegan's Wake. He lumps in all kinds of Irish mythology from all over the country.
There were two particular names you mentioned. Who were they?
So when we talk about the big the Irish mythology, right, to narrow it down a bit, is again like all myths around the world, was based on, most myths anyway, based on the light and dark, the good and evil, and ordinary heroes who have to sort of face that and survive and what have you.
It's a real underdog story job, isn't it? It's kind of like, these ordinary people going up against great empires and gods. And
these are stories that, I mean, fundamentally come from like mankind, and even going back into the Stone Age, having to face the natural world. And you can imagine in those days, how frightening survival against something so massive. You know what I mean? Like we didn't have the kind of control and insulation of technology that we have now.
I remember when I was smaller, about maybe 7 or 8. I remember my father, he was out, he used to go out fighting dragons and stuff.
Oh yeah,
that's what he used to do.
There you go.
But back Campbell, Joyce are linked. They're two dimensions.
Well, Joyce would have been talking about. So Campbell would have been aware he would have been aware of Irish mythology. It was just one of them. He studied many of them, but he would have added Irish mythology was one of the things he would have studied to create the kind of idea of a single story underlying all these other stories. And we know that George Lucas, who said it himself, he had based Star Wars on that. And you can see it in that, the heroes thing. You have the ordinary farm boy, Luke Skywalker, who starts out in ordinary circumstances, but then he ends up propelled into an event, a big adventure involved. It might as well be the gods because it's all in space with giant spaceships.
I gotcha.
So in the Irish mythology, we have a cycle of the gods is known as in the Book of Invasions, which talks about the landing of the Tuatha Dé Danann in Ireland. This is
The Book of Invasions is
the Irish mythological cycle, they call it. So it's a cycle of tales which says to explain the ancient history of Ireland. It's what the old Irish people would have believed as being the proper history of the country. But it would be history, what we call prehistory in archaeology. There's no written records.
Bit like traveller history in one way. In some ways, you have to consider the oral history.
Yes.
We don't have a written history, but we know our history and all that stuff.
So there'll be an ancient oral history of the country, and they would talk about the invasion of these peoples. But we kind of know now as well that some of these peoples they're describing are really the old gods of the country. Sometimes a little bit disguised because they were written down by Christian writers and that. But the tales survive, and we're very lucky in Ireland that they survive.
That's quite old, isn't it? Very remarkable too.
Yeah, they were written down by Christian monks, which is unusual in Europe. And anyway, the story, I'll give you the very brief story. The Irish mythological cycle involves, the big part of it is an epic tale involving the Fomorians, who were like sea pirates, versus the Tuatha Dé Danann, who were like the gods of the light side, if you know what I mean. And the Fomorians would be associated with the dark side.
I gotcha.
They're
the good to evil.
They're demons whose base is under the sea to the west. So the western side of the country would be more associated with the Fomorians, with the setting sun, and where the underworld is. So in the mythology, they invade the country and suppress the Tuatha Dé Danann and tax them heavily for years, including having to make them send them their children, corn, milk, and children. And actually, it's interesting. The plane that they have to deliver the tax to is the plane here in front of Ben Bulben. So
Sligo's connected also with this story, and links.
Sligo's connected because the big mythological cycle takes place along the line of where the big passage grave cemeteries are, like what Knocknarea is part of, and Carrickeel, and the Boyne Valley in the east is associated with the rising sun, so it's associated with the Tuatha Dé Danann and the light side. And the western sun, because it's where nighttime takes place, where the sun sets, is associated with the dark side.
So if you were to take that story,
battle,
sorry, go on.
Sorry, in the mythology, just to say it, that becomes a battle, literally, not between the sun, not in terms of the sun and that, but it becomes literally a battle called the Second Battle of Moytura. There's a first one, which takes place in Cong, but the Second Battle of Moytura yes, the Second Battle of Moytura. This first one is with the Firbolg and the Tuatha Dé Danann, who take the country. Okay, so that's one part. That's the beginning, sets up the cycle, if you know what I mean. And then the big one is the one where the Fomorians have been suppressing the Tuatha Dé Danann, who are the light side, for 20 years or something. I can't quite remember. But then a large battle takes place, and it takes place in what we now call County Sligo. Well, Tirrallial, actually.
Tirrell.
Yeah, the old McDonough's territory down in South Sligo is where the battlefield is. We passed through it. Do you remember?
That's right. Yeah.
So in this story, you have the Tuatha Dé Danann and the Fomorians, demons from the dark side. They meet in a large battle on the hill above Loch Arrow. Loch Arrow is Loch Arwa, which means the Lake of Slaughter, and it's referring to that battlefield. If you know what I mean. Yeah. Battlefield now is like full of giant stones and rocks and weird things like this. So they have the leader of the Fomorians is a one-eyed sort of giant called Balor of the Evil Eye, whose eye keeps shut all the time, because if you open it, a beam comes out and he destroys everybody. He burns up the enemy troops and all this kind of thing.
I can see a couple of films flashing through there. The Lord of the Ring with the big eye, and
I mean it's interesting because actually he's killed by Lugh the Long Arm. But the hero, the king of the original king, I think, of the Tuatha Dé Danann before that is called Nuada of the, and he's Nuada Argat Love, which means Nuada of the Silver Arm, because his arm is cut off in battle, and it's replaced by a silver arm.
Wow! Like
a robotic or a mechanical arm. And I think anyone who's into Star Wars would start to see that there's like some strange connections. The person who kills Balor, by the way, is his grandson in the end, Lugh the Long Hand. So without going into the mythology too much, all I say is that, like, okay, so Star Wars, as we know as well, we have Darth Vader ends up fighting against his own son. It's just a very similar thing. He gets his arm chopped off and gets it replaced by a robot arm.
I
Luke
got you.
Skywalker in very similar circumstances. And some people have gone further and said, well, maybe the Death Star represents like the with the beam coming out of it that destroys planets is equivalent to Balor of the Evil Eye. It's the same. It's a modern form of it.
But you could also
Yeah.
forward to go, but again, it goes into this kind of idea: the good, the bad, the evil, the not so evil. These are the themes of most films, anyway. There's always a hero.
So we could trace. We should be able to see Star Wars in nearly in lots of myths.
Yeah,
and not just Irish, if you know what I mean. But this is the Irish connection in the sense that we can.
And
we could probably go a little step further with the Irish.
The characters in there, not so much characters, but in the team, but there's the guys called the Jedis. And the Jedis are fighting what they call the Dark Force.
Yeah.
So we'll break it into their terms. It's a bit like Ireland, right? Or we'll break it down to Sligo's. Sligo's got a couple of Jedis, and we were attacked by an empire, and we resisted the empire, and we fought the empire.
Yeah.
That's a bit like that, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, that's the same thing. Yeah. So well, it's the same thing in the sense that that actually happened.
So the Jedi's dinner, the good.
That's where we're leaving. That's where we go out of mythology. The Jedi, I think Lucas had said the Jedi obviously were based on various things, including samurai, but also Christian, the medieval orders of religious knights. You know, the monks, like the Knights Templar and people like this, I suppose. But it's interesting because they themselves were descended from the Christian monastic orders. Monasteries. Okay.
All right. So the Jedi's in the movies, right?
Yeah.
They got their own place. They have an origins. Because I remember the small guy, Yoga.
So the Jedi are like warriors fighting for the light side, isn't it? Okay. So
yeah.
Resisting the Empire. Yeah. So resisting the Empire.
So you could say fascism is the dark side. Anti-fascism is the Jedi side. More or less.
You could, yeah.
And I know it's a bit political, but it's fair enough too, I think.
Oh yeah.
Just give people a feel of what we're up against. So you got the Jedi's, right, and they're fighting against the evil, and the Jedi's are based on these characters that are ancient. They've studied. They go back quite a while. What connection has the Jedi's with Ireland?
Well, now this is where it comes full circle, hasn't it? Because the Jedi, well, not that I know, the Jedi themselves obviously are in Star Wars, so they're not directly connected to Ireland, but they are now, aren't they? Because these last run of movies, Luke Skywalker has went off in search of the first temple of the Jedi. This was in the last two movies, so he was missing basically for the last two movies, you know. But they found him and he'd found the very first Jedi temple. This is in the Star Wars universe, and they've placed the first Jedi temple on the Skellig Michael Rock in Kerry, in County Kerry.
So Luke in the movie went looking for this first Jedi temple, obviously to get sources and power and information and hope to fight off the Empire.
Yeah.
You're saying this secret Jedi temple is down in Kerry with the Healy Rays.
It is, yes. So they went to an early Christian site with the beehive huts and.
So the location Star Wars came to Ireland to be partly made in Ireland.
Yeah, they're just a spectacular location, and you know.
So they found this place down in Kerry, a bit of an island, was it?
Yeah. And
that island has a history in itself, hasn't it?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So the history of that island, I mean, you have a monastery there, but a fairly extreme one, clinging to the rocks, and I'm sure many people have seen it. Skellig Michael is very famous, and in fact, even a couple of years ago, you've got these mad steps going up, if you know what I mean, sheer rock where they carved out a small monastery, just a handful of monks in the 7th, 6th, 7th, 8th century, certainly in the 9th century. These were monks that were pretty hardcore, even by the standards of those days, because to live out there was, you know, the idea was to be closer to God and to be living in the wilderness. This was a very thing that came from particularly from monastic Christianity, as we call it.
So Kerry being called the kingdom kind of rings a bell down to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So these monks had Ireland at that time, and this is important, and actually harks back to what we talked about mentalities the last time at the Matrix. Not to get too confused about it. But when we were talking about mentalities... Well,
we're always in the Matrix, so no harm.
Yeah. Well, when we were talking about mentalities and why would these this is actually the story of why these men... Why was it a little bit different in Ireland? Why was there a different mentality? Why was it not easy? And as in, so the English established the state and a conquest and all the rest of it. But why would that resistance been so ferocious? Why did the battle go on like that and whatever? And I think that the important thing to understand underlying it all is that Ireland is that when Europe was conquered by the Roman Empire, Ireland was not included. I mean, all of Western Europe.
You say it like it was a bad thing, they weren't included.
No, we weren't included.
Or were we fighting for inclusion?
Well, from the point of view of the empire, it was a bad thing.
So Rome went right across, they invaded England to create and build London, was that it?
Yes.
And you're saying that Rome never got to Ireland?
No. And therefore, a different mentality existed in Ireland than the empire. And that's an important thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is partly what allowed our mythological stories to survive long enough to be written down by Christian monks. Now, the monks who came here, you see, weren't part of the empire. And this is what's important to realize, is that very parallel, and this is an interesting connection here, but it's parallel to the story of Star Wars. The monks who came to places like the Skellig Michael and other places were actually fleeing an empire that they regarded as being a big evil empire that
retreating,
that basically ruled the known universe. There was only one place in the west of Europe that you could flee to, apart from Scotland, now, in fairness. But there was only one, which is essentially the same zone.
Well, the best fighters were in Ireland.
Yeah, there's only one major, only one place that you could really get beyond the empire, and that was either to go north of the wall in Scotland or to Ireland, and that was it. There was nowhere else. Spain, France, everywhere from here into North Africa. The Roman Empire was part of it, and originally they were.
Just quickly, briefly, I won't go too much Rome. But the Roman idea was to Romanize everybody, as in make them citizens, wasn't it?
Yeah. So Rome
therefore, they would impose their mentality on all of the inhabitants they came across.
Yeah. So we discussed it about what had happened in Ireland in the 17th century was the beginning of them trying to force the clans into urban mentality, into what they called civilization, if you know what I mean. They said, and they were influenced by Roman mentality. They were directly continuing it, actually consciously doing it.
Yeah, but you think about it, and we said it before, actually, when Rome was doing all its conquering and Romanicizing people, if that's even a word, but when they got to England, we call it England, and they built London, they created London.
Yeah.
So therefore,
Londinium.
Now for you. So basically, then the people who came from there, we call now English, really had also a Roman mentality, because they relied heavily on the philosophies and the books and the readings and the teachings. Or had he?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah.
So when that invasion came to Ireland, it was still in part a Roman mentality.
Yeah. So the English Elizabethan state, many years later, they're nothing. The English themselves were German tribes, so I would leave that aside though. But many years later, in the 1600s and 1500s, they were part of what we call the Renaissance, and they had found ancient Roman texts. Sometimes in the bins in monasteries, interestingly.
This stuff would have been trying to be hid away or something.
It had been hid away. Sometimes they'd written Christian texts on top of old texts, whatever. So they found the older texts. And a lot of these were things like Caesar's conquest of Gaul, for example, in which he conquered, in which Rome fought this battle against the Celtic tribes in Gaul. And he wrote his own document about how he did it and what was involved. Yeah. Now the English were very much when the English state, the Tudor state, was very consciously replicating, even used Roman law to justify taking land abroad. The lex nullius, I think they called it. This idea that if the land wasn't inhabited properly, if it didn't have,
that was the Roman idea.
If it didn't have cities on it, that it didn't exist in ownership.
And they passed that law here in Ireland. And
they used that in the 16th and 17th century to expand into Ireland and into.
The Romans, there was a Roman idea initially,
yes.
Was it? So eventually, I keep going back to England every so often.
Yeah.
So when they got to the English, Roman took over. England then came to Ireland and come up with this law about if people weren't on the land, the English could claim it as their own. So
well, not just on the land. If they hadn't built cities. Basically, if they hadn't
on each place, so if you came to Sligo and there wasn't a city or a town or whatever built,
that they recognised as one, then they could
say this is just wasteland. We'll take this.
That's exactly what they did. Yeah, that's exactly.
Not realising that there was actually no,
they did realise.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
No, but maybe realize. Yeah, maybe that's too it. We'll go up to a couple of comments and we see how we're getting on. All right. Leo, we did this thing in school, and you're calling they were calling travelers gypsies, and I said they weren't, and I was told to sit down.
That's interesting.
Are you coming down before Christmas? I will, absolutely. I'm going to pop down. Just on that, Leo, you're absolutely right. And again, it's absolutely nothing against gypsies, because we work with the Roma communities and we've got similarities. There's intermarriages with Roma and gypsies. But we're two different people. We're like two different parts of the world, different histories, similar cultures. But we've also got a very similar culture with Japanese culture, which are
different cultures around the world.
Yeah, and similar. We've got similar cultures with Africa. So you're absolutely right. And if you want to copy this and record this on your phone, teacher, please do not tell Leo sit down again. Leo was telling you, Leo was actually educating you. I suggest you give Leo an apprentice at that school. So keep up the good work, Leo.
Well, yeah, he'd be backed up now by what we talked about before, the genetics and stuff like that.
That's right.
Which would show that gypsies have their own proud history, but it's a different one. And it originates in northern India.
And this is Dylan Foley, Leo. He's a qualified archaeologist. So tell your teacher. Be nice to teacher too. Just in case the mother gets on to me, gets expelled or anything.
No, don't.
All right, this is Wild Tattoo. Before Wild Tattoos. This guy's got a PhD. This is a smart dude. The thing I remember most about Campbell is paletic magic, is it?
See that now?
Sorry.
Phallic magic.
Phallic.
Right.
And then he put an LOL, so I take it that phallic magic is something that...
it'd be the male energy, let's put it that way. This time of the day, I mightn't get into the...
All right, I got you.
Yeah.
Some interesting ideas, but in the biggest fan.
Where?
But the biggest fan. But not. I thought the text was missing because of something part of YouTube. Just to pull the channel. We're brilliant. We're geniuses. The thing to do was going to operate operating systems, and you've qualifications up there.
I do. Yeah.
And
I'm the one who never can switch it off.
Some interesting ideas, but not the biggest fan of the Freudian. Jung crossing his writings.
Right, yeah. I wouldn't be. Yeah, well, that's a whole other thing. That's to do with psychological,
Who's he referring to? Campbell?
Freud. Yeah, it must be Campbell. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. That'd be to do with archetypes, and do you know what I mean? Be like people have this human archetypes underlying mythology, underlying all these mythologies. It's like psychology, basically, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. I'm not quite sure because it's the first time I've
I didn't. It is important because it would be sort of like it would mean that like you're very clever when you're using those kind of things, because what they'd be saying is that humans in their unconscious, all humans would have similar. What they mean by an archetype, it'd be like the old wizard, the young virgin, whatever. You know what I mean? This kind of stuff would be in their heads, and that if you make a story based on these things, it'll resonate no matter all over the world, and it will be and it'll therefore be successful because people have them since such an ancient time that the story will be universally understandable.
Gotcha.
And that's
what Star Wars did, isn't it?
And that's exactly what it is. Yeah, exactly. That's why it's so relatable to many people. Like obviously, just people who don't like it too. But I mean,
apart from I think all Western cultures, all the good parts came from Ireland, regardless.
So, you mean Sligo in particular?
Janet Crystal, like your Christmas tree.
Oh yeah.
It's a nice one. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
That's nice.
See it there?
You can, yeah.
There's me
celebrating Christmas. Star Wars had also very interesting people with Campbell. Now, Campbell would be a great catch. If you were John Connors and you came across a guy called Campbell and he knew what he knew and what John already knows and blend him, you're in for a good movie. But it wasn't just Campbell, was there? There was other people involved with the production of that movie that had either Irish connections, influenced by Irish people. Or am I wrong?
That's what the latest movies.
Well, I don't know. Lucas's overall connections with. Did you ever tell me some woman?
Oh, I think Kennedy is her name. Yeah.
Kennedy.
Yeah, she'd be the head of Disney. at the moment, or the head of the Lucasfilm section of Disney, I think, at the moment, or whatever. She's Irish American. Yeah.
And she's Irish American, so she's
Yeah.
Irish connections. They were inspired by John Ford.
John Ford, exactly, and that's another one. That's John Ford was an inspiration on Lucas in particular. Yeah. And now John Ford was born. People might correct me on this one. I think he was actually born out in Connemara or somewhere like that. He was one famous. He was one
out
famous,
in Connemara. You wouldn't want to go out there.
No, he was famous though for the big westerns. The famous, the Big Sky, as they call them, Big Sky westerns. You know,
there are a lot of John Wayne movies.
Yeah, the open landscape, the Wild West,
the prairies, and
and of course we're going to do something about that sometime. But of course, the Wild West, as we all know, started here.
So John Ford came from Ireland. He went on a lot of westerns and based that on his Irish understanding of how the clan systems worked, and the warriors and the gunslingers and the merchant, those kind of type.
Yeah, the Wild West itself was the mythology of the West had begun, in a sense, in the English-speaking world. The mythology of the West had started as the mythology of the Pale, essentially. When they started pushing the
Pale Rider, what hardly you remember? Yeah. I'm firing up all connections.
we're going in about 27 different directions at once there, but yeah, you're right. John Ford, and of course John Ford was influential on Kurosawa, who made the
Bounty Hunter.
Yeah,
he
made Yojimbo, and he also made The Hidden Fortress.
The Hidden Fortress is right.
And The Hidden Fortress is an interesting film in which the tale about a princess trying to get back to her own land, who meets two peasants who were left over as well after the war. They're in enemy territory, but she's transporting what looks like a cartload of sticks. But there's something special about those sticks. They're actually,
there was something special about the little robot guy, wasn't there? He had a message.
Well, that's it, exactly. The two peasants end up bringing this, helping her bring this. They're like, they seem like comedy peasants or whatever, you know what I mean? But they're like ordinary. There were guys who were at the bottom end of Japanese society, were kind of, thrown into this war, and then the big shots have signed a peace treaty, but they're left out of it and what have you. But anyway, it's a story of them trying to get back home, and they help the princess. You know what I mean?
You could link in some of the biggest stories ever told, some of the greatest stories ever told, which is people like, or productions like Star Wars. You've got John Ford's westerns. You get a multitude of other movies, and yet you've all a link to Ireland. I know people in England and Scotland will be saying the similar things. Yeah, but we're bringing a bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'd like question we talked about before, which would be, so if that's the case, where's all the Irish versions of these? Yeah,
and why? Also, I don't think it's Mr. Lucas was doing a huge write-up saying, I was really inspired by Ireland, and Ireland has a great history, and he didn't, or did he? Because it doesn't look like he did. To be honest, he talks more about the Roman. Talks about the Japanese. Yeah, and that's good. It's perfect.
He might not have had that in his mind consciously. I'm not sure. We'd have to ask him.
Do you ever think, and this is a bit of a conspiracy theory in one way, do you ever think the state told them, come in, we'll give you a great deal and recording, but don't mention anything about history?
Because you mean in the modern ones, yeah.
Well, if they took it out of our 1963 report, we noticed that not knowing the history was important to the Irish state. They went to great, and again, same thing in 1922. They suppressed the old history, the old Celtic revival.
Yes.
That was squashed. People were done away with.
Yes.
1963, the Irish state went away and took away traveller history because it was linked to the same history. Lucas, I'm not saying this is the case, but I sense in some way that if it was subconscious level, good and well, that'll be something. But I wonder, based on what we're talking about, he could make some kind of acknowledgement.
Yeah, well, there is a problem in the sense that I know what you're saying, and it's not, it wouldn't have happened like that, obviously. But
I know,
but you're right. You're right in the sense that like there's something underlying the fact that we don't. Many people into the mythology, and the mythology is like all stories like that because the US has such a huge Irish influence. Obviously, that's in behind a lot of things, whether it be the mythology of the West, the frontier. Which originally was the Pale frontier in Ireland, and the idea of what was beyond the Pale, and the idea of that kind of freedom, and the fact that we talked about before about how the land was open and you could move where you wanted.
That's right, yeah.
And how that movement had to be restricted with the hedges and the bridges and everything walls and everything was designed to stop that movement.
It's kind of fortunate one, I think, because what happens, we know this now in some ways. I'm always saying we know this, we feel this, we sense this, but also we do know stuff that are directly linked with several kind of movies and actors and influences. But nothing, absolutely nothing. It's 2019. We're a small country enriched with history and culture and folklore, mythology, you name it. You name it. You're in this department. And nothing.
No, very little. Very little.
And there's companies making blockbuster movies. But again, I'm not saying we would make a Star Wars.
Well, that's what I was saying.
We would make one better.
That's suppression you're talking about. It's not that someone went along and said, don't do this. But you're correct in the sense that if you suppress one's history, if you suppress traveler history, you incidentally have to suppress all of it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Obviously. You garble a message so much that it ends up being unusable in the sense that you can't make sense
There's something of a kind of a sort of, there's something not feeling right about it, because if you think about the whole traveler culture, our traditions, our way of life, we're distinctively different from the rest of the people on the island. So when they came across us in the 1960s and they found that we have particular patterns and cultures and ways of life, they didn't care about that. Well, it's not they didn't care about it.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, they said that has to go.
Yes.
And then they start putting us into boarding schools and forced education.
Because of the story behind it was that the idea was, well, obviously we know there's another tale behind that, again, of vested interests, but the story behind it was this is primitive, the future is the other way. The future is with the urban.
Okay, that's one way of looking at it. But again, the way I would look at it and the way I feel it, and I could be wrong, is that it wasn't a case of this is a new modern world. This is this history could get us into a lot of trouble. Actually, the last guys that would try to do this, we had to shoot most of them. And these are your heroes you speak about. Because they were doing a whole Celtic revival.
They were indeed.
About an Irish way that they would like to be recognised on the island.
Yes.
Now, it's 2019, I hope we won't get shot. But I'm saying that our version of Celtic revival, or the history of Ireland, the culture of Ireland, lies solely at the moment in the physical forms and in the mentality with Irish travellers. A bit of a bold statement, but it's a bit of an obvious one if you look into history.
Yes.
So 1963.
Well, the mentality is vitally important.
Yeah.
Because if we don't have a different way of, literally a different way of looking at the world, it's a very precious thing. Because if you're looking at the world differently, then it's a creative thing. Because even as where it interferes, you know what I mean? That's what it's like. If you're into, like we talk about many times, you could be into, like, I don't know, Bollywood in India, or you could be into Japanese.
Bollywood is a Hollywood version of Indian movie or American movies.
Yeah, or you could be into they do romances and stuff or whatever.
Some brilliant ones, yeah.
Yeah. And they do historical epics, actually, interestingly enough. And so do the Japanese. The English do them too. The English have great access to their history and do all kinds of stuff that we're all watching, including
access to everyone's history.
Yeah, everybody's history, exactly. Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings is another one, isn't it? We'll talk about that.
And this is where I suppose what we're saying is that.
But in Ireland, that's
with the problems, right? If you get, we said before, but you get like-minded people trying to solve a problem, there's a good chance you mightn't solve it because they're all like-minded people to start with.
That's it, yeah.
But where you have different mentalities, different perspectives, looking at a problem, you come up with different ideas and so on and so forth. Yeah,
so that's exactly, and that's what we're saying. The empire, why is it important? Because we were saying the last time we talked about Matrix, we talked about like how the empire had created the Irish state and how the travellers are living amongst that, if you know what I mean, or living within it, but the state itself continues to do the same plan that the empire had given it, if you know what I mean, which was it doesn't accept that kind of way of life as being invalid. You know what I mean? And that's just a given since it started as part of the conquest of the country, if you know what I mean.
I suppose England likes to take a lot of credit for their conquering of the world and all their adventures, and that's taken much away from them. Is that, but they based a lot of theirs, well, they were pretty much Roman in some aspects because they were invading Roman, their ideas.
Yes.
So you're talking right, that empire did start off, Lucas is right, he didn't get to Ireland, so maybe he didn't include Ireland. But the fact it did come to Ireland in a different way, it came in a psychological way. And it has stayed right to this moment.
Well, I'm saying Star Wars is. I would say that on balance, you could say that it's correct to place the First Jedi Temple.
Is in Kerry.
Yeah, it would be correct. Well, maybe not. Well, yeah, Kerry. Yeah, it's correct to place it in Ireland from that point of view because Ireland was never part of the empire. So therefore, if you've got a narrative about the empire and about resistance to the empire, it's like what we're talking about with Star Wars is what's behind the mentality that we're discussing. So when we talk about the survival of an Irish mentality and travellers or things like that. We have to go back further and we say, well, why is that different, and why did that end up in conflict with the urban civilization, if you want to call it,
urban people in towns and
of towns and cities of the Roman, just a different way of life, a different way of looking at how things should be organized.
Yeah,
and but that had its origins in as we talked about before. The English one had its origins in the Roman Empire, version of what was normal, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And therefore that was brought to Ireland, blah, blah, you know what I mean? But when we're talking about that, we have to say, well, how come they were like that and we weren't? And the reason for that is Rome never came here to establish that mentality.
Yeah.
And even when Christianity came, it didn't come as part of Rome originally. It was a different form.
What do you mean different form? I don't give too much into it.
No, but the monks who came a lot of them were more like Jedi. I mean, when we get into people like St. Columkill and those that were West of Ireland monks, like the guy he founded Drumcliff there. And a lot of them were ones that were involved in conflict with Rome over various things like the dates of Easter and things like this. Is quite famous. And they're part of what we call the Celtic Church or the Irish Church, if you know what I mean, at that time, which was a little bit different, had different traditions. And part of its different traditions were, I mean, it was fully Christian.
Well, the Empire then would have got to Ireland in some way. It would have come through the Death Star or anything like that. But I don't God, this is going to be in trouble. It would have came in the form of religion.
Yes.
Because if the Roman Catholic Church came, Roman Empire, the Catholic Church, whether people accept it or not, is structured on an imperial setup.
Yes.
You know, to go out there, reach out and convert people. And
the Roman churches. Yeah.
I know, yeah. And the old church was, if they weren't worshipping God the same way we were, there was something wrong with them. They were savages.
Yeah, exactly.
So that empire did come to Ireland one way then.
Yeah, eventually.
But
not until much later than people think. It came with the British. Came with the
English.
Really, in the 19th century was when it was. Yeah.
And who were the English when you think about it? Weren't they a combination of the Romans, Vikings, Saxons?
Yes.
That's some battling for Ireland to be doing, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
That's going on quite a while.
It's going on quite a while, yeah. But I say that, like, it was important to understand, like, when we talked about the mythology, like when we talk about the classical mythology, like a lot of the countries that were under the Roman Empire, their mythology didn't survive. It was replaced by imperial. You know what I mean?
Well, the closer you are to the blast,
yeah,
the more abbreviated, what do you call it, your culture,
So the Celtic stories in, say, like France, for example, which was full of Celtic tribes, didn't quite survive. In any, you know what I mean, in the same way anyway. I'm not saying that their culture is any bad or worse for it, but it's just the way it is. And the same with Spain, and they were very Latinized, you know what I mean, and they speak Latin to this day, in a sense, you know what I mean, Roman, Spanish, French, whatever you call it, I'm getting confused. But the Irish language continued in Ireland, obviously, because Rome didn't come here. It didn't become Latin.
Yeah.
So we don't speak a dialect of Latin. And also the big advantage to that was that even the Christian monks that came here, they brought writing, but they wrote down not just Christian books, they wrote down the ancient stories, which is why I can tell you them now. And that's why those stories were available to someone like Joyce. And that's why they were available they were made available in the last Celtic revival in the 19th century, was translated out of Irish. And then Joyce's and all them were part of it, being influenced by them. Campbell uses them as part of his thing. And then along comes Lucas, who is American anyway, so he's, you know what I mean, is influenced, whether he knows it or not, by Irish mythology, you know what I mean? But he consciously includes that kind of thing into it. And then we have a nice one where it goes full circle, and Star Wars places the very first Jedi temple in Ireland, in a place which is true that it was outside the Empire at that time. It would have been a place that amongst the closest thing that we would call monks or warriors of God kind of monks, if you know what I mean. They saw themselves as that. You see, I could go into all of that. I don't know if
our monks were quite good fighters, weren't they?
They were, yeah, in many cases, yeah.
So they might have the Bible one hand, but they were a good, decent sword out for fighting. Well, might the Bible, but
maybe not a sword, but they used do you want to know what the traditional weapon of a cleric was?
Yeah, go ahead.
The three stick
pitchfork type.
No, it's 3 sticks joined by a link. Like you see Shaolin monks using it. It's like a flail.
I'm still lost in that.
Okay, you know, it's like a flail. You can spin it. You have a stick, and you have 2 sticks attached to it by a chain.
Like a 3-way nunchuck.
Like a nunchuck, but except a big one. You know, I think it's a weapon of a cleric because it doesn't draw blood. It's a defensive weapon.
Oh no! I think they've mastered that over the years too with the wooden spoons.
I think we've
a couple more comments. All right. The new Star Wars films are pure garbage. That's wild tattoos. Well, that's what we're trying to get at in one way. Is we feel we could do much better. That's all we're saying, really. The new Star Wars have all gone to the dark side. Yes, the people in power in our media don't make films about our own history as much as they should. count how many TV series or films there are showing African Americans' history, then look at ours. I'll go and quick answer that briefly, all right? And in 47, you can read about it. The reason they don't do it, one, it's been suppressed by the state subconsciously, whether they know it or not, or that's how the state was designed anyway. The other one is, I don't think most people in the country have got that particular mentality to make such films. They could tell them in an English version, or I mean, as in kind of English mentality. But no, they don't. I don't think they have.
Yeah, that's interesting. There you see. There you go. About.
Sorry. Which one?
Oh, you just read ahead. Yeah.
So this one's we had Black 47 recently, and Michael Collins in The Name of the Father in the 1990s, and a handful of others.
Yes.
I've watched Roots as a young Irish child. African Americans have no idea about our history, and it's a pity because, again, remarkably linked in so many ways.
Yeah, that's the whole story in itself as well.
All chapters of that are wild tattoos. People just want to be Brits and Americans because they're taught that they were nothing but barbarism before the English conquest.
Yeah, so there you go.
That's the same Irish elders, uneducated, need to be inherently get away from that way of life and need to be reestablished in an English mentality and speaking. Well, they thought Irish.
But they would be, because that's exactly what we talked about. I mean, the whole point of the empire is that everything outside it is barbarian. Do you know what I mean? Isn't it? Like
oddly and strange enough, if you're in the empire part of it and you're on looking on the outward and you're thinking, let's go forth and help these people. Look at them, they're suffering, they're killing each other.
Yeah,
that guy's running away with that guy's head.
Exactly.
He's turned into a trophy.
Yeah. And precisely. Yeah, they should all be working in shops. They should not be taking heads.
And so what they did was to call the open land, where everybody had an understanding how to operate the open land, and everybody did much better out of it. The English said, not at all, lads. What you want to do there is chop it up to really, really small squares, and you then start paying holes to live on your own land.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Don't like that.
In fact, you're also going to. They were even more ingenious. They said you're going to pay. You're going to pay for an army that's going to conquer you. You fund your own conquest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sad when you think about it.
That's pretty genius, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I'm not sure what
that's the empire for you.
I'm not sure what to say there, because I think the Sweeney were mercenaries.
Well, obviously didn't do that well out of the conquest.
No, not as well as others, I can tell you. No. As if civilized warfare is anything more than, or somehow more sophisticated.
Oh yeah.
Stealing oil, stealing land, stealing resources.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And X is they are fooled into TV thinking we were savage and invasion made us better. Yeah. Again, forced assimilation, 1963 report. This is only 50, 60 years ago in Ireland.
Yes.
So what you're saying, we're talking about Roman empires, the Darth Vader. They all had the same mentality.
Yes, and if you look at Star, I mean, didn't you say that the Empire itself in the Star Wars is consciously based on Rome to some extent.
Yeah, it mentions Rome, but this is the frustrating part, and that's why maybe Mr. Lucas can get back to us. Why isn't it a little bit more focused on Ireland, particularly when it was shot in Ireland, the history of the island? Do you think they knew that history?
I'm not sure how aware he is, but I mean, yeah.
Well, let's look at the people that are involved.
Yeah, but that's the later movies have come more in that direction, maybe. You know what I mean? When it was made in 1977, I'm not sure how much. But I think that Irish influence is in American society anyway. Do you know what I mean?
It's embedded into,
it's like kind of embedded into the
subconscious. This is always normal.
I think it's always going to be there. It's always there because, especially as you know what I mean, as you get into because it's just part of the way that the American colony was founded was out of Ireland. If you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Really, the English-speaking USA, that section of it. As I keep saying, there's historians now, as you know, who would follow the frontier, like we talked about, that the mythology of the frontier, the West, the open landscape, everything. We could apply the same thing in Ireland if we just jump back if we jump back to the 16th century and what's beyond the pale and the open land and the movement and.
The other thing is, I suppose, and again, it's not.
It's the same story.
Yeah. And the fact that
therefore, it's echoes coming back at us.
But the fact is, two guys here in Sligo, right, in the northwest of Ireland, small little island.
Cows as well are mentioned.
Was it?
Cows are mentioned at one stage, but that's a cowboys. Anyway, look, go on.
But the fact that we're here talking about this, because again, we're not talking about something that we just come up with there and then. We're taking it from places that existed, like the George Lucas movies, like the people who were involved, like the history, will it be Japanese culture, will there be various different things. These things exist, they are real things. So we're taking these ideas and creating imagination. Imagination comes from ideas and comes from people. So with Trav Vision, with that aspect, we're trying to say in a nice way is that Ireland has a gold mine of an industry. Should it ever wake up and tap into it? But again,
yes, but
I don't mean to wake up as in woke. I don't mean that way. I mean the other one is in. I don't even TR woke up. It wouldn't matter because don't get this wrong way. But you guys have been kind of cut off for quite a while, haven't you?
Yeah.
There's been a kind of a
yes.
No, and that's Sligo again, special place. They had a little undercurrent that will kept flowing.
Yeah.
So it is special in that way. We cannot take that away from Sligo.
Yeah.
But maybe we are to do this, create our ideas, coming together, Traver and Settles. And creating an industry right here, starting from Sligo.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think the key you have to crack the code.
Where would we invade first? I mean,
we're taking Glencar Waterfall off Leitrim first. That's the first mission.
That's the first mission. But the only point is that if we're here talking about wonderful things other people did with our history,
yes,
a bit like it's frustrating. For me, it's raging. Because I tell you why.
Rings is another one.
We've seen Settle people, right?
Yeah.
And we've seen them around with lovely bar top wagons. And they're charging tourists
to
go around with our wagons.
Yeah.
And they have a law at the same time that makes it illegal for us to have a wagon.
Yeah. But sure, like a lot of us are wandering around, and I grew up the same, thinking that nothing came out of here, and there's no. Do you know what I mean? Like only small little local things happen here, and nothing. It's not connected to anything.
Few fairies and
there's people I'm sure would think it's in it's bananas to be connecting that to Star Wars or this or that. You know what I mean? Or any of these big epic. But no, that's not true. It's there's a source. It's one of the sources for everything. Of that nature. I mean, but it's our own.
And the other thing is, I suppose what's frustrating is that the Japanese are mentioned in it. Rome is mentioned. I'm sure there'll be a lot of other mentions of other cultures around the world. My point is, why isn't Ireland mentioned a little bit more in it, even if it is more recent times?
Yeah,
and not just Star Wars, but other movies.
Probably simply because we ourselves are not saying it. We're not pushing that because we are, as we've talked about, that's suppressed to some extent. Those connections are suppressed, and that's partly why. I mean, that's one of the reasons, as we talk about, why it's one of the hangovers of the colonial history here, if you know what I mean. And we haven't quite got around it, but when we do, we open up a lot of this to. We will be able to express that, and when we join the dots, then I mean, nobody in America, they're going to be happy in America if we come out and say it. Do you know what I mean? Like they're going to be delighted. They're going to say, "Well, we've been wondering why you aren't making things that are to do with this, because we are." Do you know what I mean? But we don't understand why you aren't. They just don't know why this stuff doesn't come out of Ireland.
I was listening to the radio channel the other day, and just a couple of mornings ago, and it was a woman on. I don't know the name of her name, but she was on anyway from the Irish speaking. Language. So basically, she was, I think it was News Talk, one of them channels, but she was really adamant and kind of, she was frustrated because the way that the Irish farmers have been treated in Ireland.
Yeah.
Their own language, their own mother tongue.
Same thing, yeah.
And they were like suppressing it. She was very frustrated. And she did tip on, she said that Ireland is so rich in folklore and history.
Yeah. And
now she's seen it, she's feeling it. That I talk about the state, about removing travel history, about suppressing.
Yes.
But there's other people in Ireland again, are feeling why are we not doing this?
So we're not. So the person had mentioned some movies that were made, but you'll notice that nearly all the movies, apart from Black 47 is also the same. I mean, it's great because they've gone back a little step further. I think there was one attempt to make a movie in the 12th century. I haven't seen it, but leaving that aside, I think that you could generally say that there is no movie set before about 1847 at the moment. Basically, maybe one attempt. There was a couple of early Hollywood attempts as well, which are not worth talking about. But there's no accurate, nothing really accurate set before that time, and there's definitely nothing set in the Gaelic world in terms of like successfully set in the Gaelic world. Nothing realistic in any shape or form. Because if we had the greatest script in the world tomorrow, and you went, the suppression is so severe at the moment in terms of like it's unconscious, but it's so severe. The lack of knowledge about it that you literally wouldn't know how that world looked. They wouldn't know the costumes. They wouldn't know, you know what I mean. And partly that's impossible to. It's like a mental block. It's all there in front of you.
It's a mentality thing.
A mentality block. Yeah, it's all there in front of you. But it's like they're saying it doesn't exist and therefore it can't be done.
I suppose in some ways, and I know this is like it's we talked about before briefly too. Traumatized, traumatization, right? You know, people are suppressed. So even Irish people in general.
Yeah.
Celtic people in general, I should say. Irish as can be. But in that terms, the famine and the genocide, if people want to call it, / genocide, all of these were major events. Wiped out half of the island.
Yeah.
Left people to die left, right, and centre. Diseases, poverty, everything. That's trauma.
Yes.
Right. That's suppression.
Yeah.
So people who come out of that now are welcomed in some way to go into the new system called the English system.
Yeah.
But they have to leave everything Irish behind them.
Yes.
So generations later, now in this present moment, when people start talking about Irish history, they're getting almost like subconscious flashbacks of famine, hunger, disease, fighting, and all this kind of stuff. Really negative.
Yeah, so the good times aren't remembered anymore.
Yeah, no glorious battles, no good story to be told, the way of life, the humour, the mentality.
Yeah, I mean, there's people who almost flinch when you mention going into history about things, and we've experienced that. You know what I mean? Oh, maybe don't mention the 16th century. Maybe don't mention the conquest. We don't want to, because they think it's just going to bring all that back.
I've seen people tell me, I said to them, look, you don't even like your own language. And I know suddenly that they're taking the piss, like I'm trying to wind them up and so. We're not winding them up, but I want to let them think, provoke their mind. I say, you don't even like your own language. You suppress it. That's not true. It's just, it was badly taught to me at school. Well, then I said, well, why was your language badly taught to you? Why wasn't it betterly taught to you?
Yeah.
So there is a conscious thing, or not subconscious thing, a systematic thing, where it is suppressing Irish way of life. And I know that we've got some particular hate groups at times taking abstracts of history and trying to use it like saying, we're going to become a minority in our own country and all this kind of nonsense.
Yeah.
We could easily turn on the strap and say,
we're going to say
that boat is sailed.
I was going to say that actually happened and you've missed the boat.
Yeah. You're a part of that.
Yeah.
But
they're part of the problem.
well, where come from? It's on the. Yeah, I suppose I'm sorry for talking now because I'm getting all excited now thinking about all the ideas. Yeah, we need investment, and I think we can do brilliant things. I'm going to read a couple more comments.
Yeah.
There is a lot. There is a lot of funding our own conquest going on today. Well, that's relatively true. The Monty Python fella made a great series called Barbarians.
Yeah.
The Celts episode is a must watch. You can't watch it on YouTube. That's
Terry. Oh no, not Terry Gilliam. I know who he's on about. He's a brilliant historian, actually.
Yeah.
Man from Monty Python. Yeah, he's excellent. Yeah.
That's good. Why in tattoos? You have Stephen the Mad Irishman and his friends from Braveheart.
Oh yeah,
cousins of mine.
Yes,
gone but never forgotten. I can tell you.
Yes, that is an example. Braveheart.
Closest to a Celtic Ireland portrayal in a major motion picture.
That's right.
We ever got.
Yeah.
It's true, isn't it?
That is true.
They took a guy who's mad, who wanted to fight anyone.
Yeah,
predicting the Irish, fighting Irish.
Yeah, and it was good. I mean, it was the first time. It was good. But it was just that's the best we've done. I mean, at the moment we have the great success with all these things, but it's like Vikings and Game of Thrones and everything, which I have nothing against. They're great, but it's just that they're not. We're making things that aren't. You know what I mean?
Here's the interesting.
Where's the parallel one set in Ireland? But there isn't anything because we literally can't quite do it, and nobody seems to know. You know what I mean?
I'm trying to tell you what you can't do, my friend.
Oh, we know, yeah. We've given the.
Well, here's the interesting one because
we've given the unlock code here now. So basically.
Leo as Elvis, right? I'm going to this little guy earlier on. He was into the collecting of all that stuff and everything. His older brother, Dylan, actually.
Oh, great.
Is an actor.
Yeah.
So he's into acting, and he also this is just a coincidence, but he has I suppose a passion for Japanese culture and comics.
Oh, right.
And all that kind of anime.
Or manga.
Manga, that was called.
An anime, yeah.
And Leo himself is quite a talented young man, and I think we're going to see a lot more of these guys.
Oh yeah, that'd be brilliant. I think.
And
you know what I think. Yeah.
Well, Dylan loves. He loves lots of different cultures, but he's quite well read on the Japanese culture, and because your archetype. Creative side around books and magazines and so on and so forth.
Yeah, well, I think that
there's a link between that as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
Because they have a particular way of doing comic books and stuff.
Yes, so they have a lot of historical comics, and I think it's before we make films, we probably could do it making some comics that showed a Gaelic Ireland in action. You know what I mean?
That's what we were.
Yeah.
Two comedians.
So there you go.
Yeah, I forgot about Stephen, the man, Irish fella. And Wind that shakes the barley, but that's not Irish made. Here's another interesting one. Here's
they're
a
good
good
movies, but they're not.
Well,
Gaelic, they're not Gaelic.
this might be an interesting way of explaining something. I think now just popped into my head. You know how we get this frustration when we see Irish settled people making movies about travellers and how they see travellers.
Yeah,
and we're like, that's nonsense. That's not how we do it.
Yeah,
that's pretty much the same thing.
yes.
So if you took that mentality and you were trying to make a movie about Celtics, you wouldn't understand it.
No.
So you're going to end up portraying it in a very pear-shaped way. So maybe the idea, I suppose, is to fund transition.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I agree with that.
Terry Jones. Who's Terry Jones? What's that mean?
Oh yeah, that's the your man from Monty Python, who was the historian. He does great history series. I've seen just a few of them. I haven't seen many, but yeah, he's really good on that. And yeah, a rare kind of historian who tells kind of the nitty gritty story. Gives you the right. He has the mentality to see, a bit like Snyder. He understands that it's the mentality that's everything.
Snyder is
why are these people doing this?
Well, Snyder is a lot of things, but he reminds me a lot bit of Noam Chomsky, a younger version of Noam Chomsky.
Yeah.
When Dylan mentioned about the mentalities, he's studied various different cultures, different parts of European history. So he definitely gets an insight of each one of these. It's wonderful.
Speak the language, so that gives.
He hasn't come to Ireland. He hasn't heard the Irish Traveller version, and I think when he does, I think we'll unlock a few doors for him as well. Dylan, would you recommend people go watch Thursdays? Is it launched Thursday?
I think it's next Thursday.
Thursday,
19th. I think.
Yeah. Would you recommend it?
I actually don't. I haven't. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I haven't looked much into the. I'm looking forward. I haven't thought about it because I don't want to think about it. I just want to go along and see it. Yeah.
And come here.
But big thing for the likes of me who grew up with that kind of thing. Although I wasn't quite. Weirdly enough, I wasn't quite old enough to have seen the first Star Wars in the cinema. If you know what I mean. I was a bit young for that. But certainly by the time The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi and all that kind of stuff was out.
Yeah, I remember growing up watching them. Usually around Christmas time. They might appear on the television because we couldn't afford to go to the cinema.
Yeah.
And what happened then is if you missed one Christmas, you could end up getting confused.
Yeah.
But there was a sequence of them, 9 of them in total. But they didn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in the movies. Did they kind of?
No, they made 4, 5, and 6 first, and then Lucas made 1, 2, and 3. Some people hated them, some people loved them. They're the ones with Liam Neeson in that. The first ones. They're the 3.
I thought that was brilliant. I thought he was a brilliant actor in that.
Yeah, the three prequel ones.
And an Irishman. Come on.
Yeah.
Liam Neeson.
Yeah, that's right. There you go. Yeah. It's the closest we got to probably the closest we got to doing Gaelic Ireland was
Liam Neeson.
Yeah, Liam Neeson.
And Liam Neeson played a traveller
in Star Wars.
and he played a traveller, the big guy, I think it was called.
Oh, right, okay.
Back in 1990 or something. And I think it was a good movie anyway. Yeah, 2 years ago.
And now it's the last 3, isn't it? 4, 5, 6, as I said, yeah. 7, 8, 9. So 7 and 8.
Gotcha. No, sorry, I'm only clicking some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So you made the 9 movies. So you went 4, 5, 6. And then aired them. And then come back with 1, 2, 3.
I better tell the backstory. It's been such a big success, and that was it started at episode 4, so now I better tell the backstory.
I gotcha.
Yeah, and then,
that's what to do sometimes, a bit like Star Wars. Some movies, they say there's a character in it, right?
Yeah.
They can say, look, there's actually a movie or a TV series in that character alone.
Oh, yeah.
After we're finished this production.
Yes.
So that's what your man Star Wars was doing, wasn't it?
Yeah, of course. Well, there's already ones running now, isn't there? There's one there was a bounty hunter in Star Wars called Boba Fett. And he just appears very briefly in The Empire Strikes Back.
And now they have a TV series about this guy.
Yeah, The Mandalorian is now a popular TV series based on that.
Amazing.
And interestingly, it's a Western. Set in space.
It
all makes sense.
Yeah, but I can say to you, I think in some ways, I don't know what the Irish Arts Council like in Ireland or any of those places that are involved with this kind of stuff. I can understand why you can't do it. It doesn't say we can't do it. And I think hopefully with ourselves and people like us, particularly Sligo. And I'm not saying to promote Sligo one way because I've gone through elements of discrimination and racism in Sligo. Not as bad as other counties, I can tell you. But nevertheless, it's a good county. There's a particular vibe about Sligo and it has a wonderful history. And we will do a special on that very soon.
Well, certainly we're a part to play when it comes to that mythology and all the rest of it. That's for sure. And of course we have all the monuments, the archaeology, the tombs, the two of the big passage grave cemeteries and the cairns and all that kind of stuff. And interestingly, as I was going to say to you, in the future, that's what my thing was interesting. When now that Star Wars have placed the first Jedi temple in the Skelligs at an early Christian Irish site on an archaeological, it's now an archaeological site, if you know what I mean, with the beehive huts, yeah. It's protected, but not everything in Ireland is protected to the standard that we would expect. You know what I mean? Going forward, you know, because
there is a red element, and I know
so
we're suppressing. The state suppressing the traveller history, culture. They were suppressing Irish history and culture. What happens? What happens now? Like, if you
they have their own, yeah.
How do we get around that?
Well, we just have.
We have,
yes.
And this is the start of it.
Exactly. We just have to change. You change the narrative. You change the narrative. The story you tell yourself about the past is the key, and that's one of those things, isn't it? I mean, it's in Star Wars, isn't it? You go and face the dark side and come out the other side.
The other thing about this is about again, like-minded people, and I believe sometimes go back into the Matrix slightly, is that when we're told to come up with ideas to solve problems, it's almost you're rigged. Anyway, because you're not going to come up with the solutions because the problem was designed by the system that educated the people that came with the ideas from the mentality that came from the same system. So outside of that, outside the colony, sometimes I make reference to, Sligo is slightly outside the colony. It wasn't conquered the same way as various other places from Dublin onwards. It resisted, it fought.
There's pockets all over the country like that, I think. You know, everyone would benefit in this country from, although we have the look of being left.
Did everyone beat the Normans and defeat the Normans?
Not everyone, no.
Okay,
but they did in pockets, even on the Wicklow Mountains, even close to Dublin, if you know what I mean, in fairness.
Yeah.
But you're correct in the sense that our distance and remote relatively, you know what I mean, not that remote, but like the fact that we're left out of national development plans and stuff, I think is a help when it comes to realizing that you're not.
Oh yes, right.
You're not an integral part of their plans for the future, put it that way.
So suppressing the 1963 report, suppressing the 1922 report. You made references before, I'm sure you will stand over it, that you felt that sometimes that whoever with JCBs were deliberately burying Celtic monuments or castles and stuff like this.
Yeah, well, during
one of our documentaries, we spoke.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, of course, yeah. Well, because if you're using that law, that if you're using an old Roman imperial law, that like these people, that there's no urban civilization, that there's no civilization as such, it means that the bits that are built like that, like castles, etc. You know, well, firstly, they're a military threat, but the second thing is that you need to get rid of them because otherwise it makes it look like the land was already inhabited.
That's what I was going to say to you. And it goes back to almost what Mark Charles talks about, the book of discovery and stuff.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
It's the same thing.
Yes.
It's like
it's actual in law, as long as they're saying is it's in our law, it's legal for us to take this because there was nobody settled on this land. And therefore we can see there's nobody settled because there's nothing left, is there? But I mean, they'd have to actually erase buildings that were there. It helps to erase them, if you know what I mean, because then you can claim it's legal.
Are you going to watch the movie?
And of course, you also push people into being, which is the key, isn't it? We push people into being what we talked about with the nomad thing. They see these people didn't have any settled thing. These are nomads.
Same with travelers, moved them on. They had nothing here. There's no structures. You've got mobile homes, you've wagons, but that means nothing.
Yeah,
that was their homes. And we're already on our land.
And therefore, exactly. And therefore, there's no claim on the land.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's the whole.
And they brought a law out under Bertie Ahern, no other, the guy who's now the chairperson of some international group talking about referendums. The same guy governed Ireland. Now this is political, but it's still historical. He's not wrong with the Taoiseach. But in 1992, he followed up with something very similar to what we call the apartheid law, the trespass law, where if you are a traveller and you're anywhere in Ireland, you can be criminalised. In other words, we can move you. And it doesn't say where they're moving you from. It doesn't say where they're moving us to. It just says 5 miles wherever we are on a spot. 1992.
Yeah.
That's Roman mentality. That's English mentality.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, we've done quite a lot about that, haven't we? Where the machine just keeps rolling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's because, as we talked about, it's a mentality thing that keeps rolling. And I think in this one, it's important. Yeah, we've discovered why.
It's become like an automated machine. And it has.
It is automatic.
Because the machine is teaching the people
how
to maintain the system.
Exactly. It's automatic because people don't think about how it was created.
Yeah.
They don't think that that's important. They think that's just what it is.
It's always been there.
But you see, the problem in Ireland is we didn't create that.
Yeah.
So, therefore, we've an added problem because if we didn't create it, we don't really understand it fully. Well, some people might. But most people don't. And most people are afraid of the state and afraid of the courts and afraid of this and afraid of that because they don't regard it as something to do with them. Its origin originally wasn't anything to do with them. And therefore that mentality still exists. So we just kind of stay away from it. But it also prevents us from really changing it in a constructive, progressive manner, if you know what I mean. Because we didn't fully engage with it. We don't think it's ours to start with. Certainly that conscious,
and we're somewhat conscious, more conscious, And we'll say with travelers who didn't want the children, literally said we did not want our children going into settled people's schools. We don't want them educated like settled people. This is only a couple of years ago, and they were up in court, brought to the courts, threatened they were going to be put in jail if they didn't put their children into school.
Yes.
So it's the exact same thing playing out.
But that makes sense when we talk about it this way. It makes a lot of sense, though.
That mentality. Because you're saying something that was here, that wasn't ours, and they're forcing us to be part of it. We're saying, well, what you have at the moment was SEE. I mean, general settled. Same thing.
So you're living your life out there, but I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to be brought in here, and you're all going to be made into little stormtroopers, and that's the way it's going to be.
That's it. Yeah. Would you? You're going to watch the movie on Thursday, aren't you?
Yes.
Family, the whole lot.
Yeah. Usually drag everyone along.
Are they fans?
Not all of them.
We'll check the glass of more comments.
Still compulsory though.
So I'll let you finish off a couple of minutes of talk about Star Wars, what it means to you. We already talked about enough of the links. I think we're probably trying to tell George Lucas to get in touch with him one way, indirectly around funders.
It'd be interesting to know if he had what he thought about the Irish thing. He'd probably be interested to know what we're talking about. And what I'm intrigued with there is that because they've placed a temple back in Ireland, this means that the source of the Jedi mythology, in that mythology, which is developing now, because Jediism is not just a thing in Star Wars now, it's now actually a religion and has its own temples in places like Texas and other places like this. And people put it on census forms, and it really is a religion. But it's achieved religious status in a lot of the US states. So it's a minority religion right now, but actually religions start that way. Because it's based on mythology.
We couldn't be living in a more wonderful time because now we can identify as Jedis.
Well, exactly, yeah. But
I think we already had the last one.
Yeah, but see what that means in terms of the mythology goes around in a huge circle and ends up back in Ireland, right? So, but what that means is that in 50 years or 100 years, assuming that the Jedi becomes more of a religion, that means that becomes sacred. That's the sacred.
That comes the Jedi Temple.
That is the Jedi Temple.
Yeah,
and then that means that all Irish early sites are linked to the Jedi in that sense, which means that they've become the guardians for the archaeology, is what I'm predicting. So I'm going to leave it on that one.
That's good. That's brilliant. And again, it goes back,
which is a good one, because actually some of them, believe it or not, and I'm going to say this straight, have turned, and we know that for a long time. They're turned. It's natural. Some of them do it out of desperation or out of because they were very poorly paid, but some have turned to the dark side, and there's always that pressure to do that in archaeology because you need money.
How many people are in jobs that they hit?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
But yet you have to feed your kids and so on. So we understand that.
That's exactly how it's done. But at the same time, there's also a problem. It's very neglected. There's sites falling apart, and you know yourself. So hopefully that's something good for the future. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to leave it at that, and we hope you enjoyed it. And I'm not sure what we're talking about next week or the week after, but Star Wars was definitely an interesting one.
Well, I think we're off next week, are we?
Are we off next week? Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
It's been good. And again, it's linked. I think when people take ideas and then use your creative side to create imagination, create the arts, we can do that. We've all got that ability, because imagination came from ideas, and ideas came from people, and we've got plenty of them. People and ideas. Okay. Dylan, what do they say in the Star Wars movie when they're bidding goodwill?
May the force be with you.
And also with you. Oh, yeah, it's your turn. Yeah.
Oh.
What? End the stream. Bye. Take care.
Is that it?
That's it.